and Maintenance 101. My name's John Dugan. I work with Leanne at RideWise, kind of just up the street. I'm in Somerville, but also now we're scattered throughout the state of New Jersey because we've been working remotely since March 13th. Here's my email, and you can send me any questions. And anybody listening to this afterwards, this is my normal email. So if anything, like you don't feel like I got too far into something, or if I just scratched the surface and you want resources, PDFs, handouts, potentially swag, places to get things, maps, information, partners, connections, stuff like that, feel free to reach out to me. My title is Bicycle and Pedestrian Safety Manager, which means I get to do fun stuff like this, talk about bikes and being a safe pedestrian to community groups, town councils, schools, mayor's committees, stuff like that. I also work with town engineers to get crosswalks painted in or replaced, or different parking lines put in to kind of create like a safer environment overall. A huge chunk of my work scope is safe routes to school, and kind of leans into safe routes to parks and different things now that school is not really school the way that we all kind of knew it growing up. So before we get really started, I think I'll be able to see any chats pop up. If not, if somebody wants to hop on the microphone, but I'm kind of curious to see what everyone is most interested in. I know with the exception of Leanne, right now there's 3 people in there, but somebody might have signed on in the meantime, I'm not sure. But if anybody wants to just type this in the chat, what they're most interested in: A, bicycle safety; B, bicycle maintenance; C, destinations and routes; and D, other. And if it's D, other, let me know what you're looking for, because I don't want to spend a whole bunch of time on safety if you already have the right safety stuff, if you already know what you're doing, if you know the hand signals and stuff like that. So I'll give you 5-10 seconds to put that in the chat, and then in the meantime I'll get the next slide up and running. Now I heard a beep, but I'm not sure, so I'm gonna have to find a way.
So we have some responses in the chat. I'm focusing on bicycle maintenance and routes.
Okay, cool. I have some stuff for routes built in there, but I'll lean into that a little bit more, and then the safety stuff, I won't skip over it, obviously, but I'll go through that, and I'll spend some more time on the maintenance. And also, if anyone has a question and wants to type it in the chat, Amy, if you feel like it's something that I'm in the zone with, you can just pop in and ask me the question. It won't disrupt me. I'll be good. So really quickly, it's always nice to go to the history of something that you're talking about, and we're going to eventually begin to talk about bicycle anatomy and bicycle literacy. And before you get into those topics, I feel like it's kind of important to lean back a little bit more into the history. So a lot of people are familiar with the Wright brothers. They're very famous for inventing the airplane, but before they got into planes, they were bicycle mechanics. And I believe I could get my pointer right here. And this is their sister, who was a mechanic with them as well. She didn't get into the airplane developing part, but it's a cool piece of history, I feel. And this is one of their prototype, actually their first model of bike that they put together. And it kind of looks like it's old school, but it almost looks like a hipster bike of 2020. So that's pretty interesting, I felt. Okay, bicycle anatomy and bicycle literacy. Before we can talk about maintenance, we need to know what the names of some of the parts are. Now, we might not go into derailleur and the difference between a top tube and a seat post and a stem and a bottom tube. That's maybe like bicycle safety and maintenance 102 or 201. But I love these pictures because it kind of shows you all the jumble of parts that you may be dealing with if you're doing maintenance. And if you're somebody like me and you've been messing around with bikes for years, you have a few of these boxes in your garage or back of your car or somewhere stuffed in your closet. So you have to kind of understand what parts we're dealing with here. So a big part of it is getting to the bicycle ABCs. And this picture is great. I put it in here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but for anybody that wants to take a screenshot or anybody that's watching this afterwards, it's like, I guess it's not anatomically correct, but it's like an anatomical bicycle diagram. And the more you look at it, it's almost like optical illusion. The more you look at it, you're like, oh, it even has the spokes and it has the chain. Okay, just a fun slide I wanted to throw in here. This is another example of a way to diagram it. same thing. The reason I put it in here is you can screenshot it if you have a question on something and you don't know exactly what the name of it is. You have it now, so when you email me, you can say, oh, it's right below the seat tube or something like that. But you don't need to know and remember all these parts. Obviously, there's online resources. There's this picture. There's me. But just to show you, as far as the literacy goes, there's a whole bunch of words that we're going to talk about, but we're going to kind of focus on the ABCs. So I use this ABC thing for kindergarten, and I use it for up to senior citizens. So this is not like a watered down version. This is like what the League of American Cyclists use, what Safe Routes to School uses and stuff like that. So the ABCs are air, brakes, chain, and crank. Now I'm going to go actually, I'm going to go a little more in detail because I know you said you're interested in maintenance. So as far as the air pressure goes, this would be a time normally in a class that I would say, does anybody know where you can find the air pressure on your tires? But I can't see anybody if they put their hands up or not. So I'm just going to keep going as if somebody in the audience put their hand up. But you can find it on the tube. A lot of times your tube is going to be in your tire if you're already putting air into a bike that you might have had sitting in the garage for a little while or down in the basement. And it just with heat and cold with the temperature fluctuations, you're going to lose tire pressure because in the cold, your tube's going to constrict and leak air out of the stem. And then as it gets warmer, it's going to get the tube is going to get a little bit bigger and your tires are going to become flat that way. So you can find a lot of times the tire pressure standard on the tube. Most likely you're going to find it on the tire. Now that's not to say that the tube in the tire isn't the right tube. That is a situation that I can't predict and I can't tell anybody exactly is going to happen. But if you know you have the right tube in the right tire, you can look on the tire. It's usually going to give you a range. Sort of like a car, but in your car, it's usually between 28 and 32 PSI. It doesn't really change that much. Where a bicycle tire is very different. You might have some of you might have one, I don't know. Like a beach cruiser, single speed with the foot coaster brake, the big basket and the heavy bike. That's nice to kind of go down the boardwalk. Some of those are 28 PSI and it's almost counterintuitive because they have a big wide tire. So you might think it takes more pressure. Where I have a few road bikes and it's a skinny, narrow, short tire, and they have, prescribed 95 PSI. So make sure you know, I mean, if you put 28 in the 95, you're going to see that it's obviously flat. You're going to be riding on the rim the whole time. But if you put 95 PSI in the 28, the tube will probably take it for a little while until you're riding and it just completely blows out in front of you or behind you. So make sure that you keep an eye on the air pressure. Also, since you said that you were a little more interested in the maintenance, something I see all the time, and once you kind of like develop an eye for it, you can't stop but looking out for it. I live in Somerville. I'm about 2 blocks away. I'm pointing like anybody knows. I'm about 2 blocks away from the Petersburg Greenway, and especially when like gyms and everything were closed, that was like my fitness area. So I would see people going back and forth all the time. And one of the more common things I'd see on a bicycle is this, like, I can't do a, like say this is the tire and the stem is supposed to come straight out, almost as if in the same line as a spoke. The stem to the bike tube would be, pushed to the one side or the other. And yes, the tube will take air and yes, you can pump it up. But what happens is every time you hit a bump, you're creating a little bit of stress on that air stem, the valve. And eventually you're going to pop a tire that way. So a really easy fix is to deflate the tire a little bit, grab the tire and the tube if you can, and kind of push it in the opposite direction that the valve stem is sticking out. If somebody has that issue and I did not explain that the best way with my hands and not being able to see anybody's reactions, feel free to reach out to me. But that's probably the more common issue that I see with people's air tires. The tires are not inflated enough. Even if you put a couple pumps in there, you might have a tire that takes 90 PSI, and that might take 25 pumps depending on your bike pump. So make sure you look at those guidelines. As far as the brake, the levers and cables.
Hey, John.
So, yes.
Can I interrupt you for a second? We have a question. Karina, feel free to unmute yourself to ask.
I have a PSI question. So
Yeah.
I have no idea if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but I just always inflated to feel. So I
Right.
would just sort of feel until it was like, almost too firm, because I know as soon as I pop it off, I'm going to lose some. I've never lost a tire, so I don't know if that's a good thing, but am I just inviting disaster?
Well, here's the thing, like I know a lot, but I don't know every single thing. But as far as inviting disaster, no, you're not gonna. The thing is, you're not gonna overinflate your tire if you fill it to feel, which is what like we all did growing up, right? Like I never had a bike pump with a air meter, or I never had a little separate thing that I had in my bag. I mean, I do now, but growing up, you pump it, you feel, oh, it's a little squishy, I can still squeeze it. So pumping to feel is like pretty commonplace for a lot of people. You're not inviting disaster. You're not going to have a blowout if you're pumping to feel, but most likely you don't have enough air in the tire. As you're riding, if you're good with balance and can look down or forward, the tire really shouldn't be like flattened out. You know, it should more or less hold the profile. Of course, if you lean forward or back, the tire's going to squish down. But if you look down and your tire is like, you see the kind of treads in the sidewall coming back up, most likely you are underinflated. So are you inviting disaster? Absolutely not. Could you probably have a little more air in there? Yes. And when you have properly inflated tires and your tires are as firm, they're properly inflated, you're gonna save. As far as like using a kind of popular term, it's more sustainable. You are not going to be burning energy to push those flat tires and that flat rubber along the pavement or the stone or the gravel, whatever you're riding on. If you have properly inflated tires, you're going to get the most out of your pedal. Same way that like you want to have your seat fitted correctly. You want to have the right size bike for you, so you're not using extra energy pushing those flat tires around. So I mean, I would, if I were you, keep doing what you're doing, but maybe get a valve or a bike pump with the dial on there, and see how close you are to what it says on the tire. And my guess, and you can email me, I'd be curious, but my guess is that you're probably underinflated by maybe 15, 20 psi. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, cool. Yep. And that worked out fine. So anyone has a question, I mean, there's just a few of us now. Feel free to unmute yourselves. Okay, B, brakes, levers, and cables. We'll talk about the levers first because that's kind of the first thing that you see and hold. Make sure that your levers are not super tight where you have to like have like a death grip on there just to slow down. You want to be able to engage the braking system whenever, because if you are pulling up to a stop sign, you know how far you got. If you're pulling up to an intersection, you kind of know. But if something happens and you need to engage your brakes, you want to have your hands more or less all the time on the handlebars, and you don't want your brakes to be so hard where you have to like get a grip like you're about to do some bench press or something. I don't know. But make sure your levers are not super tight. Make sure the opposite, they're not floppy where you have to squeeze for the first 5 inches, and then that last little half inch is where your cables are actually grabbing your rim. You have okay, that's the levers. The cables and pads we'll talk about quickly. Make sure that you don't have, I don't think I have my pointer anymore, but if anyone can see the slides right now, make sure you don't have these rusty cables where the housings are falling apart and stuff like that. Sometimes this part of the cable, you can see the condition, but most likely if this part of the cable is rusty, what's sitting in here for this looks like it's a bike from the 70s, maybe early 80s. What's happening in here is there's water and moisture accumulating in here and starting to rust. So the brakes may look okay, but if they're rusty, at any point where you go to engage that system really hard, you might fray the cables or you might snap the cables altogether. So you go from having brakes to no brakes, which anybody can use their imagination why that would be a horrible situation as you're riding your bike. So check the cables for for tension, check the cables for rust. Also, the same thing goes with the pads. You don't want to have pads that are always rubbing against your rim, obviously though, but you don't want to have them too far. You also want to make sure that you have enough rubber, or if you have different type of pads, if you have disc brakes or something like that, it's a little different, but most people are going to have rubber pads. Make sure that you're not using old rubber pads. You might have a pad that has a lot of tread left and it looks brand new, but the rubber is almost like laminated and shiny and hard, where it's gonna, if you hit the brakes quick and you engage the braking system like quickly, it might like start to like break or chunk away and flake. You want to make sure that your pads are like a soft sort of rubber. And at this point, pads, you can go to Pops in Somerville or Bound Brook, or I mean, other places you can go. This is a local spot, but they are not really going to break the bank. And they're like probably your #1 safety measure while you're riding the bike. And as a bike sits outside, sits in the garage, just use, brakes are just like all, if anybody here has a car, brakes are a maintenance part. It's not something that lasts forever. Chain and crank, it's the last one on here. It's also probably the more technical. So I'll tell you a couple of things that you can do at home, and I'll tell you a couple of things that, unless you have specialized tools or knowledge or really feeling adventurous YouTube DIYer, you might want to take it to a bike shop. So make sure that your chain is not filthy dirty. Make sure that it's not rusted to heck. Chains also, you can get them pretty inexpensive. Amazon has them for super cheap, but like Pops has them for a great price. They might even be able to help you put them on. I mean, they definitely can help you put them on, depending on if you want to do it yourself or not. So if your chain is really rusted, the risks that you run are the rust breaking through the links and then snapping the pedal or snapping the chain, and which doesn't sound, I guess, maybe like the worst case scenario, but if, imagine you're going uphill and you're really putting a lot of stress on the chain, which is when you're going to pop a chain or snap a chain if it's rusted, and you're at the top of your pedal and your foot slides forward as you're going uphill, your bike could slip. I've seen it happen. It's kind of nasty. But if it's super rusted, don't really ride the heck out of it. You can ride it, but make sure you get something newer on there. If you have a decent chain and it's gunky because you never cleaned it, because you didn't even know that you can clean a chain, it's pretty easy. Dish soap and water. Clean that chain, the top of the chain, the bottom of the chain. Basically, you just kind of run the pedal really slow as you hold the brush and clean it. You're going to afterwards want to apply some sort of lubrication to the chain. Usually the general guideline is if you ride like wet conditions, like if you're riding mud or really like a wet kind of gravel and stuff like that, you're going to want to use a wet lube. Or if you are driving road, dusty gravel, a track, if anyone's track riding, you're going to want to use a dry lube. Also, as far as seeing how to clean and lube the chain, YouTube has a ton of videos, and there's like 2 favorite of mine that I always send to people. So if you want that video link, just YouTube it or ask me for the specific one. You also want to make sure that there's not a bunch of like slop in your chain when you lift the chain. Now, before I say this depends on the kind of bike you have. If you have a bike with gears versus single speed, you're going to have different setup. I have one of each. So I have a fixed gear bike where the tension is almost super taut the entire time, because I want the crank to be connected to the rear wheel 100% of the time. So if I pedal forward or pedal backward, that's the way the tire moves. Most people have a little bit of slop in the chain, like a little bit of extra room in the chain where you can like kind of lift the chain a little, it falls back down, but as you pedal, it doesn't bounce around. The risks you run there are the chain could hop off. Once again, your pedal could slip, but also it will start to grind down the teeth of either the crank or the cassette. The cassette is the thing in the back with all those smaller, the big sprocket to smaller sprockets. Some people probably have them on their bikes and some people probably don't. So that's another thing you want to check. The chains now are not so difficult to replace. You can get custom fit chains, or you can get a tool yourself or punch it out. And a lot of them just have like a screw or like it's not a cotter pin, but it's sort of like a snap ring pin for the chain. Now, there are bigger issues that you're not going to be able to fix. If you have a wobbly, I'm saying crank. So the crank is like what the pedals are connected to, those 2 arms, that and the thing that goes between the 2 arms is called the bottom bracket, but that's considered a crank set. Now, you might have some wiggle in there. It might just be an Allen key that you can tighten it up, but it might be an issue with the bottom part. It's called the bottom bracket, where the 2 pedal arms are connected to that spin this way. You might have an issue with your derailleurs. Those are the things that kind of go back and forth and change the gears for you. It is possible to fix them at home, but you need to have not necessarily specialized tools. You need to have patience, but you need to know what each part of that derailleur does. So as far as the chain and crank, check for rusty, check for cleanliness, check for tension. Once you start messing around with that stuff, you're in another world of bicycle maintenance, which anybody here, I'm sure, can do. But if you've never done any of it before, you might be in you're just going to be in another world. You're going to need a little bit more time to go through that. So if there's any more questions on the bicycle ABCs or bicycle maintenance, feel free to shout them out, send me an email, whatever. But we'll get moving. Here's a picture for more or less the things that you're going to be looking when you're doing the ABC quick check. You check the air, and you notice that these valve stems are straight up, like just like a spoke would be. You have your brakes, your chain. A lot of times people will refer to this as the ABC quick check and include quick release. Those are the levers that are on the front of your tire and the back of your tire. If you have that, neither of my bikes have it. A lot of older bikes don't have it, but a lot of newer bikes do have it. It makes a bike more portable. You can put it in and out of your car easier. So for anybody that does have that, I can give you a couple quick tips. Is make sure you don't tighten the thing the whole way down before you pull the lever. You can actually break some of the components in there. Make sure that once you do snap your quick releases that they are as tight as possible. It sounds like you wouldn't want to do this to your bike, but once you have everything put back together, grab that tube, the top tube, which I can use the pointer for. Grab this top tube right here and kind of bounce it up in the air a couple times. Make sure that the chain is nice and firmly in place. Make sure that the quick releases are snapped in also. So the next part, so that was maintenance. And like I said, if you have any more questions, please reach out to me. I would love to talk bikes as long as possible. But to know about bicycle safety overall, this is 3 things to know. I could probably make a list of 2,003 things to know because there's so many different things. Like everybody knows, wear a helmet, wear reflective gear, ride when, you know, those kind of things. And I didn't want to go over that exactly because, I mean, I saw some of the pictures that you all posted. I know that if you're in this 101 class, you have at least some idea, but you know, everybody 16 and under in the state of New Jersey legally has to wear a helmet. Everybody 16 and 17 and older should wear a helmet. It protects your head, but this is not in cases that you're going, you know, if you were to get hit by a car going 30, 35 miles an hour, the helmet is not, you know, it's just one piece of the whole puzzle. Same thing with reflective clothing, reflectors on your bike, lights, that's the law also. But I wanted to put 3 things that I know personally when I'm talking to somebody who's not super comfortable on a bicycle or planning a group ride and doesn't know, or family ride, doesn't know exactly how to get started. These are 3 things that I always tell everybody. Number 1, know your route. Not just like plan ahead and map out, but like let people know where you're going, kind of like anybody who does any long distance hiking or something like that. Let people know, oh, I'm leaving at 11. I should be home by 4. I'll reach out to you when I get, just so if it becomes 5, 6 o'clock and you're not home yet, somebody might be able to give you a call and say, oh, are you stuck with a flat tire or something like that. Also gives you like a little bit more confidence in the route. If you know the route and you plan ahead, you don't have to go out there with maps and everything. And you definitely don't want to be riding your bike like I see tons of kids and stuff in Somerville, riding their bike with one hand and texting with the other. But you want to be able to know the main route and also some alternatives in case, you know, there's construction or something like that. Another thing that I like to put in here for know your route is wear appropriate clothing and also bring a snack or some water. You'd be surprised, or maybe not surprised, I don't know. Maybe it's happened to you. Like people plan to go like, oh yeah, I'm going to do 10, 15 mile bike ride and have not done a 10, 15 mile bike ride maybe ever. And they go out with a little tiny bottle of water halfway filled and no snacks, and they didn't bring a wallet to buy something along the way. So just kind of like plan for your route. If you're doing a few miles, you're going to ride to the park and back or have a picnic, you know, you don't need to have a ton of stuff. But if you're going to do that 10 plus miles, make sure that you have some stops planned along the way, or you at least have something to eat or drink on you. Have your hands ready. This also goes to what I was saying before. You want to be able, more or less, to be able to engage a braking system whenever possible. Now what the next thing I'm going to talk about is using your hand signals, which is obviously you're going to need to have a hand off the handlebar, but you want to be able to do that in a safe manner and get your hands back on. Now there's different grips and everything like that for brakes, and I'm not even going to get into that. But if you look here, I'm going to get the pointer on again. This is the general accepted. A lot of times I'll talk to people and they're thinking of like when they had driver's ed, and they're like, oh wait, I know this was right, but was it? And it's sort of confusing. Now it's pretty well accepted that this can also mean right for bicycles. So right is like now I'm probably backwards on people's things, so I don't know. But this could be right for bicycle. Also, this could be right, where stop is always pointing down and left is always pointing to the left. Do you need to signal at every intersection? Trick question, because in the state of New Jersey, yes, technically you do, but you can, use your own awareness. If there's nobody around and you don't feel comfortable taking your hands off and stuff like that, use your best guess kind of thing. But oh wait, I still got my pointer on. Let me shut that off. But those are the signals in case anybody wanted a refresher. And as you're riding, if you don't already know what like your dominant hand is, for me it is actually my left hand. So when I go to do like the left signal, I have to like make sure that I have a good balance, because otherwise it's easy for me to take my right hand off the handlebar. So make sure you kind of have an idea and you don't just start doing hand signals and you don't want to cause your own crash. I don't know the percentage number. I saw a slide one time and then I looked it up because it seemed unbelievable, but a majority of bicycle crashes and accidents happen because somebody fell off their bike. So they go to start and their pedals are in the wrong spot, or their feet are clipped in and they fall off, or they wobble up to an intersection. So you don't want to be the person who's out there totally prepared, ready to go, and then goes to do a hand signal and loses your balance. Also drive like a car. This is, I guess maybe this is almost like second level biking on the road and stuff, but make sure your movements are obvious and intentional, not sporadic. You want to let people know that you are on the road. You don't want to be kind of weaving in and out between parked cars. You create like a super dangerous situation, not just for you, for the drivers. Also, if somebody is a parked car, it could open the door and really cause a serious injury. Take the lane if necessary. I put that in there and then I realized that's actually jargon. So take the lane means if you're riding your bike, you always want to stay to the right as far as safely practicable. That's how the law is written. But if the lane gets a little narrow, or there's parked cars, construction, something else going on the shoulder or the right side of the road, you are legally allowed to take the lane, which means you pull into the middle of the lane and you drive like a car. It does require some level of confidence and kind of like being comfortable on the road, but know that that is your legal right. And also, a lot of people think, oh, if I stay to the right, cars will they'll go around me. I don't want to be in the middle of the road, because then you are not only legally allowed to, but you might know this too from driving. If you see somebody in a bike pull into the middle of the road, you obviously slow down. You know you can't zoom around them. You know you can't kind of sneak by. You're just, okay, I'm behind a bicycle right now until they make their next turn. And make sure you obey all traffic laws. You don't want to be the bikers that are out there giving other bikers a bad name, driving 3 bikes wide on the road, not using your hand signals. One thing that I know gets a lot of people upset is when somebody on a bicycle pulls up to a red light and then looks both ways and then goes. A lot of people do that, but it is against the law for one, but it also kind of gives people a bad rap that are on bicycles all the time. This video, you know what? I'm going to leave the link, or I might share the link later. It's a great video. It's put together super well, but I went a little further on the bicycle maintenance part. She just talks about general safety tips and things like that. So I can pass out the link, but I'm not going to play because it's 3-minute long, and I'd rather be able to get to some questions at the end. And I know we said we're going to do 40-45 minutes, so I don't want to go over the time there. If anybody can't see this slide, I'm sorry, but the reason that I put this in here is because I assumed that this group would be into literary resources. I also have a whole list of video resources. So I put this here for you to be able to maybe screenshot it, or also really just to know that I have a huge resource. I don't have all these books, but I have a huge resource list of videos, workshops, and books that you may or may not have in the library or, can get. So this is here to just kind of let you know that there's a whole ton of stuff, from K to gray, as they say, all ages literary resources. Also, RideWise has a ton of resources online or in our online files ourselves. So it might not be public, but we have it. So I have this bicycle safety fun book. It has like some coloring, some connected dots, crossword, then it has some trivia and stories and stuff like that. So it's obviously it's for like K to 4, K to 5 I've used it for, but it's something that is a good resource. We also have the biking and we have a walking toolkit. Leanne and Sarah Catherine from our office put this together. This is awesome. This is free and online, so feel free to, I don't know if I hyperlink this, but I know I did on the other one. We also have a ton of routes online on our website. So if you go to our website, go to biking, and then you'll see routes will come up there. So as far as the person who's interested in routes, we have parking, we have destinations along the route, we have mile markers, we have historical places and things like that you can see. And I think we have 8 or 9 routes online, and we're eventually and currently we're putting more and more stuff on there. And this is actually, we can't see because I don't have the pointer. This is a link to another resource that we have. So that kind of wraps up everything. This is a picture of me, probably one of my first bike rides. I think I'm maybe 2 years old here, and I thought it was cool because I'm not wearing a helmet and I'm strapped in the back of a bicycle. But hopefully my mom put a helmet on me at that. So I just want to end it with, enjoy the ride and stay safe. Don't let the safety and the maintenance stuff get in the way of enjoying the ride. But make sure before you go out there and enjoy the ride that you have, an awareness of what your bicycle can and can't do, what the components are, how it all works together, and then, what safety elements you can put into place so you can have it, safe and enjoyable ride. So my email, again, also it's sort of easy to remember, or you can find it on our website. We also have a staff email. I'm going to stop presenting for now, and I think I do that this way. Okay, so that's that for me.